Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Leviticus chapter 6 in a clear and simple way, step by step. You know, if you've ever found yourself totally lost in the detailed ancient instructions of the Tanakh, you are exactly in the right place. Today we're going to unpack these ancient laws systematically. We're going to map out exactly what is happening, who is doing it, and why it actually matters. By taking it slow and following the text exactly in order, we're going to turn what seems like a complex set of rituals into a fascinating and incredibly organized system.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll start with context and the eternal fire, move on to the rules of the burnt offering, then the grain and meal offerings, followed by the rules of the sin offering. After that, we'll look at some practical lessons from the text, and finally, we'll wrap up with a chapter 6 short recap. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Context and the Eternal Fire. So to really grasp what's going on in this chapter, we first have to understand a major shift in perspective. If you look back at the earlier chapters of Leviticus, the text is talking directly to the common people, right? It's giving them instructions on what to bring for an offering. But here in chapter 6, the focus completely shifts. God tells Moses to command Aaron and his sons. The camera, so to speak, moves from the everyday person bringing the animal straight over to the Kohanim, the priests. These are the guys who actually administer the offerings on the altar. We are getting a totally exclusive insider's view of how the sanctuary operates behind the scenes. God's very first command to Aaron in this chapter involves something called the Ulah, which translates to the burnt offering. Now, the absolutely defining characteristic of the Ulah is that it is completely consumed by the fire on the altar. Nobody eats any part of this meat. It literally just remains on the altar hearth all through the night right up until the morning. And because of that, the priest has a very specific, crucial job to make sure the fire consuming it is managed properly throughout the entire night. Moving right along, Section 2, Rules of the Burnt Offering. There are some incredibly deliberate, sensory, step-by-step actions required of the priest here. First off, he has to put on his linen garments. And yes, that includes linen undergarments right next to his flesh. Dressed in this holy, specialized attire, he steps up to the altar and scoops up the ashes from the burnt offering, placing them very carefully beside the altar. But he doesn't just stop there. Step 3 requires an actual wardrobe change. He has to take off his holy linen garments and put on completely different clothes. Why? Because in step 4, he has to carry those ashes completely outside the camp to a designated clean place. This changing of clothes shows immense reverence. He absolutely does not take the holy garments used near the altar out into the everyday common world to do the manual labor of hauling ashes. All of this careful ash removal serves a very specific purpose, which is highlighted by this incredibly powerful mandate directly from the text. Fire shall be kept burning upon the altar continually. It shall not go out. Every single morning after the old ashes are cleared away, the priest must lay fresh wood in order upon the fire. He is the one maintaining this eternal flame. It's a physical, daily labor that ensures the altar is always ready and that the connection between the people and God is never, ever extinguished. Let's move to and see how this builds. Section 3, the grain and meal offerings. Now we're looking at the mincha. Unlike the olah we just talked about, which is an animal sacrifice, the mincha is a meal offering. It's an offering made up of fine flour, oil, and frankincense. The priest takes just a handful of this mixture. The text actually calls this specific handful the memorial part, and he makes it smoke upon the altar as a sweet savor. So what happens to the rest of the flour and oil? Good question. The remainder of the mincha becomes a most holy portion specifically reserved for Aaron and his sons. But, as you might guess, there are very strict rules for how they have to consume it. It must be eaten strictly without leaven. That means absolutely no yeast can be used to bake it. And they can't just pack it up in a to-go box and take it home either. It has to be eaten in a designated holy place, specifically right there in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. This is their officially assigned portion from the offerings. However, there's a really fascinating exception here when it comes to the high priest himself. The text outlines a unique daily grain offering required of the anointed high priest, meaning Aaron, and eventually his successors. He must bring a tenth of an ephah of fine flour, offering half of it in the morning and half in the evening, prepared well mixed on a griddle with oil. But here is the absolutely critical exception. Because the high priest is the one making the offering on his own behalf, he is strictly forbidden from eating it. It must be completely burned on the altar. The rule here is super simple. A priest cannot eat his own meal offering. All right, Section 4, Rules of the Sin Offering. Let's talk about the chatat, the sin offering. The text is very clear here, actually giving us the exact geographic location of this ritual to help us visualize the highly organized layout of the ancient sanctuary. The chatat must be slaughtered in the exact same place where the burnt offering is slaughtered, before the Lord. The text emphasizes over and over that this offering is most holy, and as we'll see, that extreme degree of holiness brings some very real physical consequences. We can almost think of this as the law of transference. The extreme holiness of the sin offering is described as being almost contagious. The text explicitly says that whatever touches the flesh of this offering will become holy. Furthermore, if any of its blood accidentally spatters onto a garment, you can't just take that garment back to your tent to wash it. No way. The spattered garment must be washed right there in a holy place. The holiness absolutely must be contained and respected within the physical bounds of the sanctuary.
Now, what's really interesting here is how different materials that absorb this holy offering are treated completely differently in the text. When the meat of the sin offering is boiled, the pot it's cooked in absorbs some of that holy essence. If it's a clay pot, well, clay is naturally porous and it absorbs those juices deeply. Because it can never be fully cleansed of this intense holiness, the clay pot must be completely broken, just shattered. But if the meat is cooked in a bronze pot, the metal obviously doesn't absorb the juices in the same way. Therefore, the text instructs that the bronze pot merely needs to be heavily scoured and rinsed with water. It's a remarkably practical, physical approach to managing spiritual purity. Now, just like the meal offering, the sin offering is generally meant to be eaten by the male priests in a holy place. But again, there is a clear, hard boundary and exception outlined in the text. If the blood of a particular sin offering is brought deep inside the tent of meeting to make atonement in the inner sanctuary, the rule changes entirely. The meat of that specific offering must not be eaten by anyone. None of it. It must be completely burned in the fire.
And this brilliantly illustrates how all these pieces fit together. It can definitely be hard to keep track of these ancient rules, so let's quickly synthesize them into a simple matrix. The olah, the burnt offering, is wholly burned. Nobody eats it. The mincha, the meal offering, is eaten by the priests, unless it's the high priest's own offering. And the chatat, the sin offering, is also eaten by the priests, unless its blood was taken into the inner sanctuary. Keeping this straightforward structure in mind makes reading the details of Leviticus incredibly clear. So the crucial point is, Section 5, Practical Lessons from the Text. How does this apply to us? Even though we obviously don't have a physical, literal altar today, the Peshat, the simple lessons here, are profound for our own daily lives. First, consistency really matters. That command that the fire must never go out reminds us that maintaining our passions, our commitments, and our spiritual lives requires daily fueling. It just doesn't happen by accident. Second, clear the past. The priest had to physically remove yesterday's ashes before building today's fire. In our own lives, we often have to clear away the residue of yesterday, the failures, or even the successes, just to make room for the fresh work of today. And finally, reverence in routine. Think about it. The priest changing his clothes just to carry out the ashes shows us that even the most mundane, everyday duties deserve our focus, our respect, and our care. Let's wrap this all up. Section 6, Chapter 6, Short Recap. So here are your key takeaways for Chapter 6. The camera shifts strictly to the Kohanim, the priests, giving them their operational manual. They are commanded to maintain the altar fire continually. It must absolutely never go out. We learn that the priests receive specific holy portions of the meal offering and the sin offering, which they must eat under very strict conditions in the sanctuary courtyard. And finally, because of the immense, almost contagious holiness of these offerings, any vessels or garments that come into contact with them are subject to very rigid cleaning and disposal rules. If we had to summarize the main theme of this entire chapter in just one sentence, it is this. The priests act as the dedicated, meticulous caretakers of the holy space. God laid out an incredibly careful order of operations for Aaron and his sons, demanding extreme care, structure, and dedication to maintain a place of divine service. And that leaves us with a real question to ponder. Seeing the immense effort required to tend the altar every single morning without fail, ask yourself, are you tending to the daily duties that keep your own fire burning? What are the ashes you need to clear out today? And what fresh wood do you need to lay down to keep your own commitments bright and alive? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.